So today I thought it'd be interesting to highlight how a seemingly innocuous change can actually significantly impact a user experience and therefore user goodwill. Um, so, for context, I came back from holiday yesterday. I've had a lovely time. Been in Greece, fantastic. Nice and suntan, nice and relaxed, ready to start my day. Log into Jira. We use Jira for our sprint management. We also use it for our support desk. It's like it's basically our core technology, and everything looks different. And I don't really understand why, because I'm heavily pattern recognition based when I do this stuff. But basically, our backlog looks off. Things aren't working. Things aren't described how they used to be. And actually, after looking at it for 5 minutes, it highlight one small change, basically this small change, like dramatically impacted my ability to use the product. So effectively what they've done is roll out how they manage epics. I won't explain Scrum now, but basically grouping projects behind the scenes. And they changed how they labeled that from using the epic name to the epic summary. So for us, we usually work with epic names because something short and snappy, like Shopify app. And then the summary would be, we need to build out an integration to Shopify in order to increase our addressable market for the product, right? So I'm then looking at a list of tasks, and instead of saying Shopify app, Shopify app, Shopify app, they now say SA. So I've then spent a morning of my time relabeling everything once I'd found, working out what had happened, and then B, renaming and relabeling everything. And as you can see, I probably get quite grumpy because this is the first day back from my holiday. It's disrupted everything. It's pushed everything else back. And we're not even power users, if I'm honest. We just use it as like a tagging and bagging system. But I'm sure this is like hugely impactful for people. And I'll show you some comments in a minute to illustrate that. So the reason I think this is interesting is not just to dig at Jira, because I actually think that you often have to make really uncomfortable changes for that impact users, especially users who kind of have been working within the limits of your technology and built workarounds. The classic example being why there are so many standard deviation functions in Excel, and it's to handle bugs in previous versions, right? And then you just add a new one rather than disrupting the community. So there's the interesting thing is like the process around doing it. Now, internally, it's hard because it's often hard to work out whether or how impactful a change would be. So in this case, you think, okay, I'll change. We'll just, instead of using epic, we've got two labels, right? We've got epic name and epic summary. They both do the same thing. We'll depreciate one of them. We've got some other changes coming in the year that will depreciate both of them. But for now, we'll just take one out and put one in. And for whatever reason, we'll go with the summary, not the name, which I think is actually kind of bizarre. And I wonder if it plays into some kind of core enterprise or big ticket use cases where these are the people paying for this is how they use it, not for the people on the ground who think, well, epic name, that's what I want to call it, and that's what I want to work with, and the rest of it, I don't mind. Benefits of that aside, the bit where it starts falling down is when on a Monday morning when the change rolls out or whatever, my world is completely changed, right? I don't even understand it and in my case it was even more jarring because I've been away for a week and I come back and I didn't know whether it was someone internally or something externally that had gone on. And I'm obviously I'm really not alone in this. So there's a whole host of really, really upset users, and quite rightly, highlighting that it makes no sense, it goes against what they've been doing, why weren't they told, etc., etc. And so for me, the real core issue here is around communication, but there's a couple of other things too. So the question is, how do you manage this difficult change? You've got to put a change in. You know it's going to upset people. How do you do that, and how do you manage that process? The answer is you do not do it in this way, where you just say you do it and then you say we've done it. And what's even worse than that, you say we can't roll it back, because that for me makes me start thinking, well, what are you going to do next? Like how do I know that what I build now I can trust you, right? That you're not going to go and destroy everything else because you've decided internally that for whatever reason that I don't understand, you haven't brought me along with, that basically that you're just going to do what you want and screw me. Like that's the emotional reaction you engender. So this is why like communication's super important. And the issue really could be handled in a load of different ways. But the first thing is that you need to be regularly highlighting and communicating with your core user base. And you should be able to highlight this issue fairly easy if you run kind of a proper rollout, right? So let's say you develop the feature internally, and then effectively you need to be able to you need your product people internally to highlight, look, this is going to affect people. This is not something in the back end that people won't notice. This is pattern recognition. This is how people work. This is going to dramatically affect their setup. So how do we manage that? So the first thing you do with something like this is you go to your core users, probably the people who pay you the most money, to be brutally honest, and say, this is what we're thinking of doing. Show them, get it working, put it on a site, show the impact on their site is best. If you can make like an alpha pool or a beta pool, depending on how far you're along, and gather that feedback immediately. And that will kind of immediately tell you whether this is going to be a problem or not. If like 90% of them are like, it's fine, and 10% or whatever, then maybe that's what happened here. Maybe this is actually a market segmentation issue where smaller users like us are much more impacted in it than your bigger, larger paying customers. And then the way these things stack up, there's often far more smaller people than the big ones, right? So you've actually got bias in your sample set that you haven't accounted for. And then maybe one of the learnings from this is like, how do we address that? So, okay, you find an alpha group and you talk to them and you address that feedback. Right, you know this is going to be spiky. You should have got that from the alpha group, because they're like, well, this is going to dramatically affect us or whatever, right? The reason I think that in this case they haven't done that is just that the choice of which field they use made no sense, right? So why use a description for a label, not the name, right? And there's probably a whole host of internal reasons for doing it, but it's not intuitive from the front end. It's an anti-pattern, right? If I name something, I expect to see the name of the label. I don't expect to see the description of it. And for anyone who hasn't read The Design of Everyday Things, I strongly go and recommend that book, because that's how you need to be thinking from a front end and product perspective. Like, is it obvious? If I see a red button, do I press the red button, right? Which way should a door open? If it's got a handle on it, I pull it, I don't push it, right? Same here. If it's called a name, I expect to see the name in the label. I don't expect to see an essay. So that's the first bit. Like, go and talk to people before you do it, especially if you know it's going to be punchy. And there will be times when you have to do punchy updates. That's fine. The second issue is then feature flag it. Like, if you're not small, right? If you can highlight it in platform. There are a myriad of tools that will do it for you and just sit over the top. And I know they have this technology because they spam me with kind of workflows around getting me to use the platform more. So if it's coming, highlight the changes or have the ability to toggle the changes so I can test it and see the impact, right? Finally, and this is the kind of most egregious one for me, don't just go out with, we can't roll it back, it's happening, right? Like, that to me is the real red flag as a product person, because that's saying, okay, we know that we've made the community upset and we're not going to work through a solution. We're just gonna bang this out. And for me, this is really egregious in this case, because it doesn't seem that there is a lot of other issues that this migration has caused. And it seems much like someone in the back end has decided to do this, and there hasn't been enough thought on how this impacts the front end. And obviously the front end is how your core users communicate with the platform. And there are what I mean by this is that people are finding kind of discrepancies in how different parts of the platform use, which fields they use, and the rest of it. And this kind of highlights that there hasn't been enough testing, there hasn't been enough feedback, there hasn't been enough review and attention to detail in managing this process. And then what that means is, for the end user like myself, is that you just end up with a really kind of cobbled together user experience where not only do I not trust you to not mess with my workflows, I don't really understand the workflows anymore. They've got more confusing and more involved. And when I've tried to talk to you about it, you've kind of shut it down. And the solution you're offering is for me to write some code myself to just basically monkey patch what the rollout I didn't like. So this is quite a lot to go through here, but really I thought this kind of highlighted a very interesting topic around like how you manage pushing out difficult updates that you know are going to upset people. And really the answer is just communicate, and then listen, right? Listen, and then take that feedback on. Cool. Like, follow, subscribe, all the rest of it. I hope this is interesting. I'm going to keep banging these out. And that is what it is. Nice.